On 5 News, A&E waiting times are now the worst on record. More and more people are waiting longer and longer for emergency care. It's also revealed that those with cancer who need urgent treatment are waiting more than 2 months before getting it. Also tonight, child refugees the government's branded shameful for going back on a promise to let them into Britain. The father of a young British woman murdered in India tells us he's furious the main suspect is still free. And the man who survived 5 hours trapped in a ditch by using yoga.
You just give up. There's no way. I'm not letting my daughter. I must think about how they're going to find me face down in a dam, dead.
Hello and good evening. I'm Sian Williams. 5 News has learned that A&E departments across England are performing at their worst ever level, with senior doctors telling us the number of people being seen within target times has fallen below 80% for the first time on record. The target is 95%. The Prime Minister told us this afternoon that there's record funding going into the health service, so why is it happening? And do these targets really tell us the whole story? Our political editor, Andy Bell, reports.
For the NHS, accident and emergency is the pressure gauge, and those who know it best say that gauge is showing danger.
I think this winter everybody's realised that we're at a crisis point. Things are only going to get worse and something's got to be done, unless the future is going to be very, very bleak indeed.
Under the target, 95% of patients must be dealt with in under 4 hours. This is how A&Es performed in 2014 and 2015. But last year, the percentage seen within the target was significantly lower. Figures released today show that last December, just 86.2% were dealt with in 4 hours, the worst figure on record. But 5 News has been told by the Royal College of Emergency Medicine they believe the figure for January will be just 79%. Jim Taylor has MS, but when there was no bed for him in a specialist ward, his daughter was told to take him to A&E.
We'd been there at this point kind of 10 hours, 11 hours, and I could hear them try and sort it out, and they just kept coming over and saying, we're sorry, we know this isn't acceptable, we're doing our best. And for them to have to be the ones that are apologising, I just imagine is very frustrating.
The Prime Minister was meeting her Italian counterpart today, but she had to deal with matters closer to home.
The British Medical Association says you have your head in the sand and don't recognise the seriousness of the situation. What can you say to British voters to reassure them that the NHS really is safe in your hands?
If you look at what has been happening in A&E, in December we had a record number, the busiest day in accident and emergency that took place, that has taken place in the National Health Service. We are now seeing something like nearly 3,000 more people being seen within the 4-hour standard every single day.
The government insists it has put in an extra £10 billion. But is that 4-hour target itself a problem? Last month, the Health Secretary hinted it would be kept, but maybe redefined.
If we are going to protect our 4-hour standard, we need to be clear it is a promise to sort out all urgent health problems within 4 hours, but not all health problems, however minor.
The minister who brought in the 4-hour target 15 years ago says it must stay.
I think we keep the target, but you support people to deliver it properly. And if you are to scrap the target, then you better have had a public debate, because you're really saying to the public, expect to wait considerably longer in our accident and emergency departments.
The NHS is treating more people with more money than ever before, but it and the government will always be judged on where it's falling short.
Let's talk to Andy now. We saw you putting the Prime Minister on the spot over these new waiting time figures. She insists there's no crisis. Is she right?
Well, she would certainly say there are pressures on the NHS, and on that we've had more figures today. We are told that more than 25,000 people are having to wait more than 2 months for cancer treatment from the moment that they've been told that they must go and get that emergency cancer care. And that's a figure that's something like double what it was back in 2010. Now, we should remember, obviously, there are millions of people all the time being treated successfully inside the NHS. But if you're someone with a long wait at A&E, perhaps if you're one of those people, one of those 25,000 who've been told they need urgent cancer care and can't get it, then it must feel to them like a crisis.
Thanks, Andy. A man who's on trial over the murder of his fiancée, the children's author Helen Bailey, has been called a complete liar as he told a court about men he claims were behind her disappearance. Ian Stewart is accused of drugging and killing Helen before burying her body under their home. During cross-examination, he said she was actually abducted by two businessmen who were after her money. Dominic Reynolds reports.
Helen Bailey's hit novels for teenage girls had made her wealthy. The sudden death of her husband had left her grieving. Together, those circumstances made her vulnerable, a jury was told today. Under cross-examination, Ian Stewart denied that he took advantage of that, starting a fast-moving relationship with her, and then 4 years after they met, leaving her body in the cesspit under their garage. By then, he was her fiancé, and the main inheritor of her estate, worth more than £3 million. Prosecutor Stuart Trimmer QC said this is a long-crafted, cynical and cruel plan of yours to do away with Helen Bailey. We can't know how you did it, but I'm going to suggest you smothered her while she was asleep. That wasn't true, said Mr. Stewart. He denied putting her to sleep by feeding her these in the scrambled eggs he made her for breakfast. Zopiclone, a sleeping pill he had been prescribed, found in her body. Ian Stewart's account centres on two mystery men who said they were associates of Helen's late husband. He said they came to the house, assaulted him and abducted Helen. Ian Stewart said he only knew these men as Nick and Joe, but they forced him to hand over Helen Bailey's phone. He said they forced him to look into getting power of attorney to give them £500,000 of Helen's money. And he said all the while they threatened him that they would hurt him, hurt Helen and hurt his sons if he went to the police. His sons Oliver and Jamie were in court as their father was called a complete liar who'd created a fantasy. On Helen Bailey's website today, some of the witty writing that so appealed to teenage girls. Her Electra Brown stories, the biggest hits of her 22 titles. Ian Stewart denies all the charges against him. He's previously told the jury he and Helen were very happy together and he didn't need any more money. Dominic Reynolds, 5 News at St Albans Crown Court.
The Ministry of Defence says it's had to scramble RAF jets to intercept 2 Russian bombers flying close to the UK. The aircraft reportedly spent several hours around the UK's airspace, but at no point flew in. It is the latest deployment made by the RAF in response to the Russian military. Last month, planes escorted warships that were sailing through the English Channel. Tata Steel is selling one of its businesses, which employs around 1,700 people in South Yorkshire. It's signed an agreement for the sale of speciality steels to the Liberty House Group. Tata's bosses say it's good news for workers. And 22 children had to be taken to hospital after a school bus crashed down an embankment and overturned in North Lanarkshire. It happened during the morning rush hour in Cumbernauld. Police say no one was seriously injured. There's been strong criticism of the government's decision to scrap a scheme to help child refugees. A programme that was originally expected to bring up to 3,000 lone children to Britain has closed early, even though only 350 have actually been helped. The Archbishop of Canterbury says he's shocked and saddened, but ministers claim the plan only encouraged more children to make treacherous journeys across Europe. Here's Julian Drucker.
Last October, the first group of child refugees to be brought into the UK arrived at an immigration centre in Croydon. 70 came and many more were due to follow. Indeed, 3,000 unaccompanied minors from the squalid camps of Calais and elsewhere in Europe were originally expected. So why has the government said it will now stop at 350? Opposition MPs called on the Home Secretary to explain why.
Where does it say that instead of the 3,000 that Parliament debated, we will only help a tenth of that number? Where does it say that when we get the chance, we will somehow turn our backs once again? It doesn't, because we didn't say that.
How does she live with herself, leaving thousands of children subject to disease, people trafficking, squalor?
Amber Rudd defended the decision to end the scheme, the so-called Dubs Amendment, after France raised concerns it could be encouraging more children to make perilous journeys.
They do not want us to indefinitely continue to accept children under the Dubs Amendment because they specify, and I agree with them, that it acts as a draw, it acts as a pull, it encourages the people traffickers.
It was Lord Alf Dubs, a survivor of the Holocaust, who pushed for UK immigration laws to be modified last year. Today he told 5 News of his frustration.
Well, I'm bitterly disappointed because I think it goes against what the government said. The government said they would accept the letter and the spirit of the amendment, and they're not doing that. I think it goes against the mood with which Parliament passed the amendment, and it goes against the mood in the country. I think it's a shabby day for Britain.
The Archbishop of Canterbury agrees. In a statement, Justin Welby said, "I was saddened and shocked by the government's announcement. Our country has a great history of welcoming those in need, particularly the most vulnerable, such as unaccompanied children. The vulnerable in crisis-hit areas will get aid and resettlement," the government stresses. But campaigners say the UK is being uncaring to thousands of children. Julian Drucker, 5 News.
Coming up on 5 News. The young girl who tried to take her own life 3 times by the time she was just 15. She's using her experience to help others. And how yoga saved a man who got stuck like this for 5 hours. We'll see you after the break. Welcome back. You're watching 5 News. It's almost 4 years since a British backpacker called Sarah Groves was murdered while staying on a houseboat in Kashmir in India. The chief suspect, a man who was also staying there at the time, has appeared in court more than 80 times, but the trial has been hit by constant delays. Now, Sarah's family have called on the British government to step in and help their increasingly desperate fight for justice. Sarah's father, Victor, has been speaking to Minnie Stevenson.
I mean, she was one of those dream children who never gave you a problem. She never swam against the tide. She still, nonetheless, had a very strong personality. She was everybody's friend, immensely popular.
Sarah Groves was just 24 when she was murdered in India. She had been stabbed more than 40 times. For her family, 4 long years of unbelievable pain have followed. Today, her father, Vic Groves, told me he wants the Foreign Office to step in after what he called the appalling and chaotic handling of their case. The man accused of Sarah's murder, Dutchman Richard de Wit, now faces his 88th court appearance, while her family are still no closer to answers.
I want the British government to tell or liaise with or have a dialogue in some form with the Indian government to say, can you not put this onto a proper playing field, footing, where it has the respect it deserves? And that's all we want.
In April 2013, Sarah had been sleeping on a houseboat owned by her Indian boyfriend's family when she was murdered. Richard de Wit, who has a history of suffering from paranoia, was also a guest on board but denies killing her. Sarah's family have even met the man accused of murdering their daughter after the judge gave them permission.
When you talk to him, you're raising that question at the back of your mind all the time. Is this the guy who savagely, brutally stabbed my daughter 42 times? It does seem when you start to talk to him, that is not something that he's capable of.
Whatever the outcome, Sarah's father told me he just wants the truth and justice for the daughter he called so popular. In her dad's words, Sarah was universally adored by all. Minnie Stevenson, 5 News.
Caitlin Noodle is doing well at school. She has very loving parents and she's good at sports. On the outside then, a happy, healthy, successful child. But this is a girl who's tried to take her own life more than once, and she's still only 15. Inside, she had felt helpless and hopeless, but eventually, after many setbacks, Caitlin sought support. And now she's using her story to raise awareness of mental health issues among young people. She spoke to Peter Lane.
GCSE revision for 15-year-old Caitlin, looking ahead, planning a future, But on 3 occasions, Caitlin has attempted to take her own life. The first when she was just 12, leaving a note for her family.
I wrote it to my mum, my dad, my sister and my brother, just basically saying that it's not their fault, it was me, this is just how I'm feeling and no one could have changed that, and you shouldn't feel sad about it. I genuinely thought that I wouldn't have woken up in the morning.
On the outside, she seemed to have it all: good home, happy family, private school. But Caitlin hid the depression and anxiety she was feeling from everyone.
I felt very alone. I was getting quite a lot of panic attacks in school. It doesn't pick and choose from your background. Don't make a difference. You could have nothing and could be happy, or you could have everything and not be happy.
Caitlin eventually confided in a friend and a teacher and has posted her story on Facebook to help other young people. Her family say the support system needs dramatic change, and that when Caitlin was admitted to hospital after her suicide attempts, she was put onto a children's cancer ward.
You're listening to people who have got dying children and they're saying, oh, why are you there? You know, my daughter's got 3 weeks to live with cancer, but why are you there? You feel like a fraud. It's the worst feeling in the world, the worst feeling in the world. So somehow we don't fit anywhere because it's mental health.
Caitlin's advice: do talk and focus on the small things you can achieve to get you through.
Little things like what you're doing tomorrow, what you're doing this afternoon, what you're doing next week. I know that I'm in a place where I can help others and that I don't need the help myself and that I can pass it on.
Caitlin now receives regular counselling and is fundraising for the charity Young Minds. She hopes that by speaking out, she can reach out to other children and teenagers who need help. Peter Lane, 5 News.
And if you've been affected by any of the issues raised in Peter's report, or of course if you're worried about someone you know, you can find links to organisations that can help. They're on our Facebook page and you search for C5 News. A digger driver in Australia has been describing how he survived a rather difficult and unusual predicament. Daniel Miller was using his machine when it fell into a waterhole. He got trapped for 5 hours. He says adopting a yoga position saved his life. Simon Viger reports.
Just about keeping half his head above water, Daniel Miller was pinned to the bottom of the pond by a bar on his digger. Not that that's going to prevent a bit of Aussie understatement.
Back pinned, arms up. Thought, oh, this is quite serious.
Daniel was able to get his nose above the waterline by doing underwater push-ups. He was stranded like this for 5 hours before a neighbour heard his cries for help. It all started when the mudbank gave way under the weight of the digger.
Didn't have time to jump clear. I hit the water, went under the machine. The next thing I feel is the roll bar come across my back. I just kind of thought to stay calm, gotta stay calm, stay calm.
As sticky spots go, this takes some beating. Daniel believes some basic yoga helped him adapt to his predicament. Police say he is very lucky to be alive, and Daniel knows it.
I could just give up. There's no way. I'm not letting my daughter. I must think about how they're going to find me face down in a dam, dead on my property. I made it, you know. I was sitting there, I was determined to make it.
Eventually, the rescue teams were able to pump out the pond, and Daniel had won the day by a nose. Simon Viger, 5 News.
Aretha Franklin says she's hanging up the microphone so she can spend more time with her grandchildren. Soul singer's most famous hits include Respect and Say a Little Prayer. She's been suffering ill health but says she's hoping to record one more album before she retires. Finally, if you find organising family snap a little tricky, take a look at this. More than 500 members of the Ren dynasty in southeastern China have got back together for Chinese New Year. Village elders who'd been updating the family tree organised the celebration. In all, they managed to track down 2,000 living descendants spanning 7 generations. And if you want to see more on that and plenty of other stories, go to our Facebook page and search for C5 news. It's pretty astonishing, isn't it? Before we go, Matt's joined us to tell us what's coming up on 5 News tonight. Hi.
Just the two of us here, Sian, of course. We're going to have lots more at 6:30 on our top stories today, the crisis in the NHS. I'm going to be joined by an A&E doctor to find out what it's like for professionals and patients on what's being called the front line. Plus, lifting the lid on the murkier side of fashion, former model Victoire Dozer was just 17 when she started out, but now she's revealing how the pressure to lose weight led to eating disorders and even suicide attempts. She'll be telling me her story tonight in an hour's time.
See you then. Thank you, Matt. That is it for now. Claire Nazir has the weather next. I'll see you soon. Matt, of course, back at 6:30. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.